Hello, Bitcoiners. Mark Berger here. I'm your Bitcoin consultant. It is Sunday, 11:05 a.m. Eastern Time. We're at block height 957,717, currently trading at about $64,000 100. And I'd like to talk to you about a very important development in my personal investing and Bitcoin strategy. And that has to do with the company Strategy, formerly known as MicroStrategy. Now, I know I have talked in the past about Bitcoin treasury companies and particularly the idea of the infinite flywheel. And the idea is that corporations would borrow US dollars in the markets to buy Bitcoin. And as Bitcoin appreciated, they would be able to leverage the performance of Bitcoin. Now, I still believe in that premise. However, I am now souring on MicroStrategy or strategy and the treasury companies because I believe they are really leaving the original raison d'etre, the original ethos of Bitcoin, which was to separate money from the state. As you may know, we live under a central banking regime. We do not have a free market in money itself. Money is created by our states, by our governments, and we are robbed every year through money printing by these states at anywhere from 2 to 20% a year. And so Bitcoin was created to break this power monopoly between money creation and the state. And this was in disgusting view in the 2008 crisis, when the bankers made gobs of money and ordinary people lost a lot of money and their homes. And that is why Bitcoin was created, was to break this corruption between the banking system and our governments. Now, strategy is not necessarily going to lose you money in the long term. But that's not why I am selling my shares in Strategy. I am selling because of the principles behind it. Now, I did not get into Bitcoin to get rich or to make a lot of money. I got into Bitcoin for freedom, to liberate humanity from this central banking and government cabal, to bring free money back into the world, to bring sound money back into the world. And what I see now is a corruption of these principles and of these values inside of the treasury companies like Strategy. So how do I know this? Well, I have been fighting a battle for the soul of Bitcoin over the last 6 months, known as Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 110. It's quite heated, but in summary, Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 110, will ensure the long-term decentralization of Bitcoin because over the last several years, we have seen an enormous growth in arbitrary data in the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, why is that a problem? It's a problem because it increases the costs of running nodes. And nodes are what make the Bitcoin network decentralized. Bitcoin's value primarily comes from its properties of decentralization and security. Bitcoin will continue to become the world's best money as long as it remains decentralized and secure, as Jeff Booth has frequently said. Now, this decentralization is under threat through arbitrary data, data that is not related to monetary transactions. We in the BIP 110 community want to limit and push back against this arbitrary data that is being put inside of the Bitcoin blockchain and is threatening decentralization. How does it threaten decentralization? Well, if you have to store extra data in your nodes, all of a sudden you need a larger hard drive and you need larger amounts of RAM, short-term memory. So you need more long-term memory and more short-term memory in your node. Well, what does that mean? That means you need more money to run a node. And when you raise the price of something, you raise the bar to become a node runner. It used to be that you only needed maybe $200 or $300 to run a node a few years ago. Now to run a node, it requires much more money because we now need 2 terabytes of data to store the entire blockchain, and we need at least 12 gigabytes of RAM, probably more like 16 gigabytes of RAM. And with AI devouring all these resources, the prices of these things have gone up and up and up. Now, that may not be a problem for you or me, But in order to ensure decentralization, we have to keep the costs as low as possible. And to me, raising the cost of running a node is a Fabian attack on Bitcoin. What is a Fabian attack? A Fabian attack was named after the Roman general Maximus Fabius or Fabian or something like that. And he was fighting Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who was feared for his elephants and actually conquered parts of the Roman Empire by crossing the Alps with his elephants. Now, the Romans at the time were not as strong in order to confront um, uh, Hannibal and his elephants directly. So what did they do? This man, Fabius, he devised a strategy of small battles in a way that you don't directly confront your enemy and you slowly drain the resources and you cut off supply lines. In other words, a war of attrition over long periods of time. Not one big battle to destroy your enemy, but lots of smaller battles, like little paper cuts over and over and over again that slowly bleeds you out and you don't realize you're dying. This is known as a Fabian attack. A wolf in sheep's clothing, even, they like to disguise themselves as in order to keep the battles running. And I believe that's what we've been seeing in Bitcoin since at least 2017, when SegWit opened up the block size as a compromise in the block size wars. And I think that was really the first attack on Bitcoin that was significant to attacking Bitcoin's decentralization. And then another major blow landed in 2023 with the Taproot upgrade, which was supposed to give us all sorts of benefits, but it never did. It never gave us better privacy, better multi-sig, all these things that were promised to us. All it did was increase spam on the blockchain, non-monetary data on the blockchain, so that today we have about 50% of all data on current blocks are not related to monetary transactions. And if we, look into the future, nodes will become increasingly rare until the point where Bitcoin is only run through very wealthy holders. In other words, the rich will only be the ones that run nodes. And we're going to lose this egalitarian open protocol to closed corporate interests. And that's what we see happening right now. So Michael Saylor, just yesterday, Michael Saylor is the chairman of Strategy, the chairman behind the stocks of MSTR and STRC. He came out against BIP 110. He said we have 110 other things to be worried about besides spam on the blockchain. Well, he may not be concerned about spam on the blockchain because he is a billionaire and his company holds 800,000 Bitcoin. They can easily afford to run nodes. But that is not the purpose of Bitcoin, is to serve corporate interests or the interests of billionaires. Bitcoin is for us, the people, to separate money from state. So there's another reason why I'm very concerned about MSTR, and that is rumors that there are deep state connections with MSTR, with Strategy Company. The company itself is located in suburban Washington, D.C., and Virginia, very close to Langley, Virginia, the center of the CIA. Strategy also does about $50 million worth of business every year to the deep state. Very concerning developments. So this all raises red flags. Now, this doesn't mean you're not going to make money. You're going to lose money if you still hold these stocks, if you still hold MSTR or STRC. In fact, if you need cash flow, yes, STRC is a very logical product. However, there are other ways to get your cash flow in Bitcoin besides STRC and other preferred stocks that pay you a monthly or a daily dividend. And that is simply buying Bitcoin and holding it in self-custody and then paying yourself a dividend every month or every year. It's the same thing. Instead of paying some other company to give you a dividend, just do it yourself. All it requires is some discipline. So you buy Bitcoin, you hold it in self-custody, and then every month or every year, you sell some of that Bitcoin and you give yourself those dollars. And that's how it works. And this is what I help people do. I help people buy Bitcoin, put it in self-custody, secure it, pass it on to heirs, and to continually add to Bitcoin. So schedule a free consultation for yourself or for any of your friends at bitcoinconsultant.us. This is what I love helping people to do, is to become self-sovereign and not rely on a corporation to give you a dividend on your Bitcoin. So there's another issue that I've long been concerned about with Strategy and these Bitcoin treasury companies, and that is that they say that they hold Bitcoin. Well, that's very nice. And even the charters of these companies, or, the bylaws of these companies, they say they must hold the Bitcoin. However, we don't really know. We're just trusting. We're trusting that they hold the Bitcoin. We have no way of verifying that they actually hold the Bitcoin. And the whole point of Bitcoin is that we don't have to trust anyone anymore. We don't have to trust a bank. We don't have to trust a broker. We don't have to trust the government with our money. And so this is violating one of the first rules of Bitcoin, which is don't trust, we verify. And Strategy and these other Bitcoin treasury companies, we are not able to verify that they actually hold the Bitcoin. And this is a problem. And Strategy and these Bitcoin treasury companies, they have a good reason to say we're not going to, give you the public address so that anyone can look up that wallet and see how much Bitcoin they have in it. They claim that, well, giving out a public address is something of a security issue and we could potentially be targets of hacks. Well, this is true, and they can hide behind a corporate veil because officers of a corporation have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to maximize profits and obviously not to lose money. And if there's a risk and they are not responding to the risk of losing money, in this case, losing their Bitcoin, they could be held liable for being held like in dereliction, violation of their fiduciary duties. So that's how these companies say we're not giving a public address. We're not going to let you verify how much Bitcoin we have. But this is a real problem. This is a big problem for me and always has been. The other problem is that Strategy does not custody this Bitcoin themselves. They don't hold it like in a hardware wallet. They don't hold it in some multi-signature vault somewhere with multiple key holders or things. We don't really know what they do. But what they do tell us is that they're using Coinbase as their custodian. And this is a big red flag for me, having dealt with Coinbase for many years. They are not Bitcoin friendly. They are not self-sovereign friendly. They are not freedom friendly, and they're certainly not sound money friendly. So Coinbase is the custodian, and they're supposed to be holding 100% of the Bitcoin. But me and several others strongly suspect that Coinbase rehypothecates the Bitcoin. What does that mean? That means they are engaging in the traditional banking process of fractional holding. In other words, they may say they hold a million Bitcoin, but they might actually only hold 100,000 of it and then lend out the other $900,000. And when you can lend out the Bitcoin, you can earn an interest for your Coinbase corporation. You can earn money, you can use that money. And that's exactly the traditional banking model that's existed for hundreds of years. And it's called fractional reserve lending. The problem is that creates paper Bitcoin. What's paper Bitcoin? It's Bitcoin that's strictly in paper only. It's not real Bitcoin. It just says that you own Bitcoin. You don't actually own Bitcoin. They say you have Bitcoin, but you don't actually get to verify it and see on chain, does that Bitcoin really exist? So you buy some Bitcoin from Coinbase, they say, oh, yeah, sure, you got some Bitcoin. We'll give you a little computer readout here and, it says you got some Bitcoin, but you don't actually own any Bitcoin until you take it into your possession. So that's what they're doing, I believe, is they're creating a paper Bitcoin market. And what does that do? Well, that changes the hard cap, the hard limit as to how many Bitcoin exist. It's written into the protocol that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin. And when you create paper Bitcoin, you're increasing that limit. You're going over the 21 million limit. You're then moving to 22 million, 23 million, 30 million, maybe 100 million Bitcoin. We really don't know. And so why do I think that's happening? I think that's happening because Strategy has bought about 400,000 Bitcoin in the last year alone. But what has happened in the last year? Well, we had an all-time high in price in October last year of about $126,000. And since then, we've lost 50% of the value. We're down now at 64,000. So how is it that you can, take 400,000 Bitcoin off out of the market and the price drops? Look, anyone understands that that doesn't make any sense. So what I think that's happening here is these Bitcoin treasury companies like Strategy and also the ETFs, the exchange traded funds like IBIT, BlackRock's ETF that's supposed to hold Bitcoin. I think they're creating paper Bitcoin and they're inflating the supply. So that's why now I strongly urge everyone to get out of these ETFs, to get out of these Bitcoin treasury companies, because it's a Fabian attack on the decentralization and the hard supply of Bitcoin itself. It's an attack on Bitcoin, even though we were lured into these ETFs. Well, it's easy to hold Bitcoin through an ETF. We were lured into these Bitcoin treasury companies because they were sold as amplified Bitcoin. It's not just owning Bitcoin, it's owning a performance greater than Bitcoin. We were lured into these things through and trapped through our own greed. We were lured into STRC. Oh, you can earn 11.5, 12% on your money. And these are all very, very dangerous things. And I fell victim to it as well. So that's why I'm going to be selling my MSTR. I'm going to be selling my STRC and converting a lot of that into Bitcoin in cold storage. And then when I need a dividend, instead of relying on STRC, this stretch product to give me 11 or 12% a month, I'm just going to pay myself. And that's how it's going to be done. Now you're saying, well, I still want amplified Bitcoin. I still want that. Well, okay. You still want to be a little bit greedy? I understand. Everyone likes making money. Well, there's another way that we can go about this. We can actually mine Bitcoin. We can mine Bitcoin, and that in itself is like an amplified Bitcoin if you do it right. So right now, mining rigs are at a low price, just like the price of Bitcoin is. And you can actually acquire Bitcoin through the mining process cheaper than the Bitcoin if you bought it on an exchange right now. So that's a way if you want your amplified Bitcoin, buy a miner. So again, if you're confused about how to do this or, you know, intimidated by how to do this, it's really not hard. If you have some money, all it takes is about $5,000 to actually own your own miner. You never have to touch it. We can put it in a hosting farm that then runs the machine for you, manages the electricity, manages everything about it. Only thing you do is get to collect the Bitcoin. It's really fantastic. So I'm going to be putting some of my STRC and MSTR money into a new mining rig or two. So these are other ways to go about it. So please think about this carefully in the future because it's very easy. The lure of easy money is very, very strong, as the old Don Henley song says. And we all are susceptible to this, but we have to look more deeply into these things as to what are these financial instruments doing. Bitcoin is being corrupted by Wall Street in a way, and we can no longer trust corporations to be holding Bitcoin on our behalf. There's no reason to the safety, the convenience, it's all in our hands if we want it. We just have to reach out and grab it and take it to become self-sovereign and free. We don't have to rely on a corporation to do this for us. We can do this ourselves. And I am here to help people to do this and to get comfortable and to become powerful. Now, if that's for you, and I realize that's not for everybody, most people still want to be children and want to be taken care of, and well, that's the way, life works. That's the way the world is. But if you're someone who really wants to be free and self-sovereign, you want to be a Bitcoiner holding your own Bitcoin. And this is what I will help you to do with great pleasure. So with that, it's a lot to take in. Ask me any questions in the comments below. And then also, I wanted to tell you about something else that I've been thinking about for a very long time, and I wanted your input on it. I have been thinking about writing and communicating some pretty out there ideas concerning Bitcoin as a spiritual practice. And it's something that just keeps coming up for me over and over and over again. And I wanted your ideas. Do you think that's a crazy idea? Do you think it's an interesting idea? Do you have a spiritual practice? Do you see how Bitcoin relates to spirituality at all? This is something that I want to explore in the months and years ahead in my own communications and with you. So please let me know about that and have strength, courage, and faith in Bitcoin because this is our one chance to liberate humanity from central banking tyranny and slavery. All right. Be good, everyone. Love you.